Hi, this tutorial is brought to you by pm-prep35.com. pm-prep35.com is a free PMP training website offering PMP mock exams and tutorials and chapter and tests. In this session, I am going to cover estimate cost process. The estimate cost process is part of project cost management knowledge area, and it's one of the planning process. The estimate cost process deals with coming up with cost estimates for activities as well as rolling that up to the project level. So it can be done at the project level or it can be done at the activity level. So if you understand the structure of how activities are positioned, you have the project phases, then the project phases have deliverables. Deliverables are broken down to work packages. The work packages are in turn decomposed to activities or becomes the activity list. So the activity list is you can allocate your costs at the activity level, or you can roll all this up for each of the activities to come up with the project cost estimate. The cost is one of the triple constraints. The others part of the triple constraint of scope and time. So the cost, until it is baseline, you have to have your other baselines in mind to build your cost baseline. So the whole idea to come up with the cost baseline is to have a approved number which you have to take care as the project progresses, and you should not be allowing breach of the scope or the cost as such. So the estimate cost process ensures what could be is a first step to coming up with the cost baseline, which is part of your budget cost process. Coming up with the cost baseline is part of budget cost process, but in this process, the estimate cost process, you are coming up with a estimate which has the probability to become a cost baseline. So in estimate cost process, you take care of your human resource cost or your material or equipment cost. Then you also take care of any impacts due to risks. So you take care of the contingency cost. Then you take care of any inflation allowance. Then you also take care of any cost of quality, cost of non-conformance. Like if I don't take care proper measures to ensure proper quality, then what amount of testing or inspection that I have to build into my estimate cost process. These things are part of your estimate cost process. So the estimate cost process has an impact on many of the knowledge areas because it is an important knowledge area, and the process as such, the estimate cost process as such, is really important. So one more thing to keep in mind is when you do the estimate activity resources, you come up with a resource requirement for each of the activities. Now when you have the resource requirements, you specify this type of resource and this quantity of resources required for each of the activities. So each of these resources or the type of the resource has a specific per hour rate. So those rates get accountable when you build your estimate cost process. So all these understandably goes into a scheduling tool, which is a project management software. So the project management software has your activity list. For each activity there is a planned start and end date, so that becomes you can calculate the duration. So based on the duration, you also allocate resources, and the number of resources and the type of resources have a cost attached to them. So based on the type of resource and the number of resources, you have specific cost allocated to each of the activities. Now when you roll up all the activity cost, you get the project cost. So this is your bottom-up estimation approach, wherein you start from your activities and then build your project cost. But then there are times when you might not know what is your activity cost, wherein you are working in a new project, wherein you don't even have an idea of what could the project cost. Then you take a rough hit as to what could be the rough cost or rough cost estimation based on your prior experience in a different project, which might be almost similar to this, but then you have not had an exact experience to us very much a similar project or the same kind of project previously. So that's where you give an analogous estimate, which is a top-down approach, which is really rough in terms of not being to the point, and it is fairly it's not quite accurate. It's an approximation of what could be the estimate. So that approach is called top-down or the analogous estimation approach. So these are estimation techniques. You also have a parametric estimation technique wherein you can easily relate it to square foot. What is the rate for a per square foot? So that's used in the construction business. These are based on proper models built in as to how that area as such will grow in a few years, and based on that they decide on the cost per square foot. So that is called as parametric estimating, where you have a strong model built into it, so that you can come up with easily extrapolate that to come up with what is the cost for 1,000 square feet and things like that. So these are the techniques that you normally use. But you basically look at your risk register, then you take care of your human resource plan, which has details about staffing attributes, personnel rate, because once you have the activity resource requirements, you build your human resource plan. The human resource plan is a summary of what are the types of resource needed, what are the quantities needed, and it also accounts for the personnel rates based on what is the market condition and things like that. So you pick up that information from your human resource plan, and then that becomes a feed to this particular process. So human resource plan is an input. Then you have the risk register, wherein you can see what are the contingency risks, and then you can account for that. What is the cost that you allocate? Because contingency reserves are a percentage of your ultimate project baseline. But there is one more thing called the management reserve, which is allocated for the unknown unknowns, which you can't even expect what could be the risk that might come into the project. You can't anticipate certain risks like a catastrophe. So those things, it's not part of the baseline, but then you have to raise a change request to make it part of the baseline. But if you take the contingency risk, it is a percentage of your baseline, cost baseline. So you allocate a percentage, like 10% of your cost estimate and things like that. So that's where your contingency risk also you need to keep in mind, and you come up with your actual project cost estimate. So with these things in mind, let's quickly walk through the estimate cost process. The estimate cost process is concerned with coming up with the cost estimation of the project based on the activities listed in the schedule. So the activity list is part of the schedule. So that's part of your project management software. Resource estimation includes cost of human and material resources. It also factors in inflation allowance and contingency cost. The contingency cost is nothing but your identified risk cost. Contingency, identified risk. Management reserves, more related to unknown and unknowns. But contingency is more related to known unknowns. This process needs to be revisited as more specific details are available in the project life cycle in order to make the estimate reliable, since initially the estimate is rough order magnitude. So most of these triple constraint mostly this is applicable to the triple constraints estimates or baselines. You base these from the project charter. So you start off on a idea or a rough order magnitude estimate, and then as you get more information, as you gather more requirements about the project, as you get more idea about each of the requirements, you are easily able to break down your work into activities, and you also get an idea of the cost also, because if you know what you are going to do, then you know what is the resource required, what is the type of resource required. From there you can calculate the cost easily. That's why this whole process iterative, what starts off as a rough order magnitude, then it gets more shape, and you get a better estimate. So that's what this conveys. This is applicable to all of the baselines, or especially to the triple constraints. What you say initially will take, for example, if you look at the schedule or the duration, you initially say to take roughly about 100 days, but as you 10 days down the project, you can easily make out, no, it's not going to take 100, but it probably will take about 89 days, or it's going to take 89 days, because you're able to break down the work really well. Cost estimates can be expressed in a specific currency or can be specified in hours in order to facilitate comparison, since currency can have fluctuating rate. So this is mainly you can specify your cost estimates as hours also, because when you specify it as currency, if the currency is fluctuating, there's a currency, there's an exchange rate, and the currency has a tendency to fluctuate, then in that case you specify it in hours. So the units can be in hours or it can be in specific currency. Cost estimation can be done at the activity level or can be summarized at the project level. So when you want to summarize at the project level, when you're starting from the activity level, you roll up to the project level. That becomes a bottom-up estimation approach. Or if you don't have an idea of what would be the activity level cost, you directly start and say, okay, this project is going to take so much based on my prior experience. That is top-down approach. Cost estimation includes a consideration of alternatives like make versus buy or lease. So while you are coming up with a cost estimate, there are times when you need to you'll be encountering some of the activities which you don't have expertise to do. Obviously you will think of buying that because making such thing is not in your hands, or your team is not capable of doing it, or it might cost more time and effort in form of training and all that. So that's why you would prefer to buy it, which would cost more less, or it would be a lot more cheaper to buy it. So those things are also considered as part of estimate cost process. Main thing to consider again about estimate cost process is, if you have clarity, you do it at the activity level. If you don't have clarity, you do it at the project level. So that's the main key driving force for the estimate cost process. So the main input or the cost management plan, there is this is not a surprise, because most of your processes derive what should be done, or they seek guidance from the respective management plan. That's why the cost management plan is an input for this process also. Human resource plan, basically because this will have the personnel rate, types of resources, the quantity of resources, because your activity resource requirements, which is output of your estimate activity resources, gets a proper shape in the form of the human resource plan. So there you write down what is the resource required, the number of resources required, and what is the rewards and recognition policy. So in order to build in that, the rewards and recognition will have to be allocated some cost estimate, which will be part of your budget later. So these things are part of your human resource plan. The project schedule is the schedule baseline. Obviously this is the, when you're deciding anything about the time, you need to consider about scope and cost. When you're deciding anything about cost, you obviously need to consider anything from scope and time coming in. So this is a time component. The schedule baseline is also taken care. And also there's one more reason. When you use your schedule, when you're using your schedule, that's where you will put your resource requirements, the resource type, and then the rates related to the resource in the scheduling software. So although you're doing a cost estimation, here you are seeing it as a discrete process. On a real-time project, you'll be doing this as overlapping processes. When you're building your schedule, you'll also put in your cost of the resources, type of resources, which will quickly come up with the resource rate or the activity cost as such. So this is seen as a discrete process in case of PMBOK, but then in real time all this will be very overlapping process when you work on a real-time project. So project schedule is an input to this particular process, no wonder. Then you have risk register, from where you will find out the identified risk. Since estimate cost process needs to factor in contingency cost, risk register is a key input to this process. Scope baseline. Okay, the other part of the third part of the triple constraint, project schedule is one of the baselines that is already an input. The scope baseline is an input basically because it has scope statement, WBS dictionary. The WBS and scope statement play an important role in coming up with the estimate costs, because you have one place wherein the WBS has a hierarchical structure. You can easily see what would be the cost of what are the different work packages, how much it would take to do each of them, then roll up at the project level. So because it provides you a hierarchical structure, it's easy to come up with the cost at the project level, or at the work package level, or the control accounts level. The enterprise environment factors are important input, because until your cost is baseline, you have to account for external factors, which might be in the form of consultants who charge more in this country because of some conditions in which the country's the project or the organization is positioned in. So enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets, because this is one of the key processes. You're coming up with the estimate until your cost is again baseline and part of budget cost process. You need to account for as much lessons learned as possible. So the tools and technique, expert judgment, you're using experience from your team members, SMEs, to come up with the estimate. Bottom up estimating technique, very important basically, because when you want to roll up from the activity level to the project level, then analogous estimation, if you don't at all have idea of what each activity would cost or what is the so that's where you have an analogous or a top-down estimation approach. Parametric estimation, this is used in case of specific industries like construction, where square foot rate is used, because that's followed across the industry. 3-point estimating, this uses most optimistic, pessimistic, and most likely estimates. Based on that, you come up with, you have different formulas, triangular distribution formula and beta distribution formula. You calculate that and come up with the estimate. So this is also more of a expert judgment or guess, wherein you don't have much idea about what it would take, but then you have a rough idea. So that's where you use the 3-point estimating technique. Reserve analysis, this is mainly used for coming up with the contingency reserves and management reserves. Understand that contingency reserves is a percentage of the project estimate or the cost baseline, but then management reserve is not part of the cost baseline. You have to raise a change request to get more funds to increase the baseline. So that's where management reserve is dealing with unknown unknowns. Contingency reserves is dealing with identified risk, which is your known unknowns. Risks are called as unknowns. Cost of quality, an estimate of cost of conformance and non-conformance to quality must also be added to cost estimate. Yeah, so prevention cost and all that, defect cost are all part of your cost of quality. Project management software is used for scheduling and inputting all your data. Then vendor bid analysis, in industries where you don't even have an idea of what could be the cost that would be needed or the estimation, you call the vendors, and from them you can make out this would be the cost incurred for this particular project. So that's where you base your project cost as such. You extrapolate the vendor bid cost, because the bids have a cost, and based on that you bid the cost of the project as such. Then you use group estimation group decision making techniques, because team is involved to come up with the activity level, what is the resource required, time required, and you can have the team involved. So you know, to get buy-in from the team, you use group decision making techniques. So the outputs from this process: activity cost estimates. Cost estimates can be at the activity level or the summary level, includes both direct and indirect costs. So you have to account all the costs possible: contingency costs, then quality cost. You have to account for any other thing which is like the direct and indirect cost. Like for example, you are using an infrastructure and you're sharing your project, you're doing the project with among other projects. You have to share the cost between those projects in terms of electricity, building, rent, and things like that. So those become your indirect costs. So those also should be accounted as part of your activity cost estimates. Basis of estimates, supporting details like assumptions, rough order, magnitude, etc. Because cost estimation as such cannot be precise, so you have a rough order magnitude, say for example 10 plus or minus 10%, that also you add to your cost estimation. So that's one important thing. Project document update, because like any other process, like if you look at until you baseline your schedule, your activity list can get updated. So the same way, until your cost gets baseline, obviously any process like the cost estimation process falls before that. This can result in updates to for example the activity list, because all these are overlapping process in real time. So this can result in project document updates. So that's about this process called estimate costs. Do visit pm-prep30.com to access other tutorials for different processes, and also access the chapter and test and mock exams. Thank you.